Hey guys, I hope everybody's doing well. Today for math class we are going to be working still in chapter 12, and today we're going to look at lesson 6. Today's lesson we are going to focus on metric units of length. Before we get started, just remember at any point you can pause the video to finish taking notes or to go back and hear something again. Okay, so for switching gears, we are looking at metric measurement rather than customary measurement, which is what we use in the United States. And metric measurement is what everybody else basically uses. So there are certain facts that you're going to need to know, but to get a better idea of how those work, I want to show you the whole metric system, but you're not going to use all of these pieces, okay? So starting off in the metric system, I'm going to start with the largest units and go down to the smallest units. So starting off with the largest, we have kilometer, which you get a capital K and a lowercase m. We have a hectometer. We've got a decameter. And then your basic unit is just meter, which is lowercase m. So this basic unit would be like the whole number 1. So everything before this would be larger than 1, and everything that's going to come on this side of it will be less than 1. So after your unit of meter, we've got a decimeter, and notice the first letter is lowercase now instead of capital. The lowercase is going to show that it's less than 1. So you've got decimeter, then centimeter, and millimeter. Okay, so largest down to the smallest. And this right here is your basic unit, your meter unit. Okay, and the way that this works, when we were doing customary measurement, we had all different types of numbers going from one measurement to a next. So for example, we said 12 inches equals 1 foot. We have 3 feet equals 1 yard. Okay, but when it comes to the metric system, it's a little bit easier because everything is what we call a power of 10. It changes by a power of 10. So if I start with meter, every time I make a little jump in either direction, it's going to change by 10. Now, depending on where I'm moving to, I'm going to multiply or divide, but it's always going to be by a power of 10. Okay, so for example, if I do just one hop, so 1 to the guy next door in either direction, it's going to change by 10. So decimeter to centimeter will change by 10. Centimeter to millimeter will change by 10. And same thing up here. Kilometer to hectometer will change by 10. So every little jump is always going to change by 10. Now, if I'm starting with a large unit and I'm going to a smaller unit, I'm always going to be multiplying by 10 when I make that change, okay? If I'm going from a smaller unit and coming up to a bigger unit, I have to divide by 10, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So every hop, just a next door hop, I like to call it, is going to be a change of 10. Now, what do you think is going to happen if I take and I skip 1? So what if I go from meter, I skip over decimeter to centimeter? Well, I've kind of I've kind of made 2 hops, but I'm just doing one big jump, okay? So for this jump, because I've got these 2 little ones underneath it, well, we know that 10 times 10 is 100. So if I'm going to go straight from meters all the way to centimeters, I'm going to be doing that times 100, okay? And same thing anywhere else. If I make one jump, I skip over a unit and go to the one next, it's going to be a difference of 100. I'll multiply or divide, depending, by 100, okay? Now, what do you think would happen if I start, let's say I start with meter, I skip over decimeter, I skip over centimeter, and want to go all the way to millimeter. I am jumping 1, 2, 3 times, but in one big leap. Well, we said before, if I did it twice, 10 times 10 is 100, so that jump would be 100. So now if I'm going to do 10 times 10 times 10 to make this big leap, that would be times 1,000. Okay? And same thing here. If I go from kilometer and I skip over hectometer and decimeter, and I want to finish at meter, I will be leaping. So I'm going to need to multiply by 1,000. Okay? Now, I wanted you to see this, and I wanted you to understand how all of these work. However, you're not going to be using all of these units of measure. For this lesson, you need to know millimeter, centimeter, decimeter, meter, and kilometer or kilometer. So we need to understand that hectometer and decameter are here, but we're not actually going to be using them. Okay? So the basic facts that we need to know for this lesson, we need to know that 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters. Okay, so if I look at my chart, centimeter to millimeters. 1 centimeter times 10, 10 millimeters. Okay, I need to know that 1 decimeter is equal to 10 centimeters. Here's decimeter, centimeters is right next door. That's a times 10. So decimeters, 1 times 10 would be 10 centimeters. We need to know that 1 meter equals 10 decimeters. So if I start at meter, decimeters is right next door, multiply by 10. Okay? I need to know that 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. So now I'm going to start at meter, and I'm going to jump over decimeter and go to centimeters. But because there's 2 little jumps in there, I'm going to multiply by 100. So one of these meters is equal to 100 centimeters. And then I need to know that 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters. Okay, so this meter, jumping, making a huge leap all the way down to millimeters, times 1,000. So one of these would be 1,000 millimeters. Okay, so those basic facts you need to know. The other one that I want you to know is that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. So one of these gigantic kilometers, if I make a huge leap, skipping over hectometer and decameter, if I make that huge leap and go to meters, it would be times 1,000. Okay? So those are the basic units, the basic facts that you need to know for this lesson. All right, so if we're working on conversions, okay, so let's say, for example, I give you 3 meters, and we want to know how many centimeters that is, okay? So in order to do that, I've got my problem written down, and just like the last few lessons, you need to give us the basic unit of measure, the basic fact written right underneath. So we're comparing meters and centimeters. So I'm going to look at my chart. Okay, here's meters and decimeters. That's not the one that I need. Here's meters and centimeters. So I know that 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. And every time I'm going to write that basic fact right underneath it. And then we're going to look and see, how do we go from 1 to 3? Well, we multiply by 3. And then what we do to one side, we do the same thing to the other. So I'm going to do times 3 over here. 100 times 3 would be 300. So we now know that 3 meters is equal to 300 centimeters. Okay? let's do a different problem. Let's say we've got 6 decimeters, and I want to know how many centimeters that is. So decimeters to centimeters. Okay, here's decimeter, here's centimeter. 1 decimeter equals 10 centimeters. 1 decimeter is equal to 10 centimeters. And again, I'm going to look and see, how do I go from 1 to 6? Well, we multiply by 6. Do the same thing to the other side. 10 times 6 would be 60. So I know that 6 decimeters is equal to 60 centimeters. Okay, so these are just your basic conversions. Now, if I need to do a comparison, so let's say we've got 4 meters, and we're going to compare that to 40 decimeters. And remember, your comparison options would be greater than, less than, or equal to. So just like before, I like to take the bigger unit. So what's bigger, a decimeter or a meter? Well, if I look up at my chart, remember we started with the largest and went down to the smallest. So meters right in the middle and decimeters right below it. So a meter is larger than a decimeter. So I like to take the larger one and convert that. So I'm going to take my 4 meters and I'm going to change it to decimeters. Okay, so we know based on our chart, 1 meter is equal to 10 decimeters. 1 meter is equal to 10 decimeters. And we do times 4 and times 4, and we get 40. So we've got 40 decimeters compared to 40 decimeters. Well, now that they're in the same unit, I can make my comparison super easy, and I know 40 is equal to 40. Okay, so this process shouldn't be much different than what we were working on last week. You're just working with different units of measure. Okay, the other thing that you're going to be asked to do, if I give you, let's say, 65 centimeters. If I give you 65 centimeters and I ask you to write 65 centimeters as a fraction, and then also as a decimal, let me show you how that works. Okay, so centimeters. I'm going to go up to my chart and I'm going to look and see. I always start with my unit, which would be meters, and I want to know how far away centimeter is from my unit of meters. So remember, decimeter, centimeter. So I had to make a pretty good jump, a medium-sized jump to get to centimeters, and it's going to be times 100. Well, I'm going to use that 100, and for my fraction, I'm going to make that 100 my denominator. And then all I have to do is take whatever the number is and make it my numerator. So 65 centimeters written as a fraction would be 65 hundredths, 65 over 100. And I came up with that 100 because I went up and used my chart and said, okay, meters is where I have to start every time, and I have to go medium-sized jump, so times 100 to get to centimeters, and that 100 will be my denominator. And we hopefully remember, once we have a fraction and we need to change it to a decimal, I don't have a whole number, so I can start with my 0 placeholder in my ones place, put in my decimal, and then 65 hundredths. I need that second digit to finish in my hundredths place value, and we go tenths, hundredths, and it's there. So my decimal would simply be 0.65, 65 hundredths. Okay, I'd like to do another one of these. So I'll put it right below. Let's go with 9 decimeters. And we're going to provide a fraction and we're going to provide a decimal again. So decimeters this time. So if I start at meters, I just have to do a little jump to get to decimeters. And when we make that little jump, it's a difference of 10. So my denominator is going to be what? I hope you said 10 because it's just a little jump. So my denominator will be 10, and my numerator, remember, it's whatever number you've started your problem with. So in this case, it's 9. So 9/10 will be my fraction, and then when I change that to a decimal, remember my denominator determines where my decimal finishes. So I can put a 0 placeholder in the ones place because we don't have a whole number, put in my decimal point, and then 9. And 9 finishes in the tenths place value, which matches my denominator. So I've got 0.9, or 9/10 would be the appropriate way to say it. Okay, so both of those are examples of how to change your measurement into a fraction and into a decimal. Okay. The other thing that I'd like you to work on, and I'm going to flip my page, but if you still have space, you can keep working. I'm going to give you a series of numbers. Okay, so we're going to look at 5,000 millimeters. We're going to look at 55 over 100 meters. We will look at 50 centimeters. We will look at 500 over 1,000 meters. And let's just stick with those for now. Now I'm going to give you a chart. Okay, so for this chart, we'll just break it up like this. We've got 5 meters. Give me a break. Let's go 55 centimeters. Give me a break. And 500 millimeters. Okay, and then we'll draw a line so that these are our titles of each of our columns. Now we need to figure out where to place each of these measurements into each of these columns. So we need to see which of these measurements are equal to each of these titles at the top of each column. So the first little trick I'm going to tell you when you're given a problem like this, you have one number where it's 55, and everything else is a 5 or a 5 with zeros. So as soon as you have something that's got 2 digits other than a 0, I want you to immediately look at your data and see which of these up here has something other than zeros. Okay, so we've got a 5 and zeros. We've got a 5 and a 0, a 5 and zeros. But look at this. We've got 55. So I'm going to start here and see and determine, can 55 hundredths of a meter be the same as 55 centimeters? Just so I don't have to flip back and forth, I'm going to put my conversion chart up here. So we've got kilometer, hectometer, decameter, meter, and then we've got decimeter, centimeter, and millimeter. And I know we said earlier, we're not using decameter and we're not using hectometer, but that way you can see all of them listed, and then you can make your jumps a little bit easier. So if I've got 55 hundredths meter, and I want to see what that is as a centimeter, well, didn't we just practice a minute ago? If I took 55 centimeters and made that a fraction, 55 centimeters, well, remember we go to meter, I have to skip and do a jump, so that would be times 10 times 10, so times 100, so that 100 would be my denominator, and then the 55 would be my numerator. So is 55 hundredths meter the same thing as 55 centimeters? It is. So I can put my 55 hundredths meter right in this column. And then I can cross it off because I am done with that. Now, do you think that there's going to be any more of these leftover pieces of data to fit in this column? If you said no, you are correct, because none of these other pieces have 55 and any zeros as the makeup of their numbers. They're all 5 with zeros. So we know already the rest of these numbers are going to go either in the 5 meters or in the 500 millimeters. And that's our next job to figure out. So first off, we've got 5,000 millimeters. Well, is it going to make sense to say 5,000 millimeters is the same amount as 500 millimeters? Their unit at the end is exactly the same, but the number at the beginning is not. So I can already tell you it's not going to go over here because 5,000 and 500 are not the same amount. But before I just automatically say that it goes in 5 meters, let's do our conversion. So if I have 5 meters here, and I want to jump all the way to millimeters, that's going to be a times 10 times 10 times 10, or a times 1,000. And 5 times 1,000 is 5,000. So I know that 5,000 millimeters will go in this column because it is equal to 5 meters. And we can cross that guy off. So now I'm down to 2. 50 centimeters and 500 thousandths meter. Let's look at that fraction one again. So 500 thousandths meter. Well, let's see. 500, 500. Maybe these two go together, but let's check it out and see if that works. So if I have 500 millimeters and I wanted to write that as a fraction, remember we start at meter. If I make a huge leap to millimeters, I've skipped over 2 other units, that'll be times 1,000. So that 1,000 would be my denominator, and then my numerator stays exactly the same. So it would be 500 thousandths. Hey, look, same thing. So I know I can put that, oops, sorry, 1 too many zeros. So 500 thousandths meter is equal to 500 millimeters. All right, guys, we're down to one last one. 50 centimeters. Well, I know it's either going to go here or go here because I'm dealing with just a 5 and a 0. So I'm going to go up to my unit. Meters, centimeters. I skip over 1 to get to centimeters. So that was going to be times 100 to go from meters to centimeters. So let's say I had 5 meters, like this one, 5 meters. 5 meters times 100 would give me what? 500 centimeters. Well, does that match this? No, this is only 50. So let's see if we had 500 millimeters. So centimeters to millimeters. Well, if I have centimeters, if I've got centimeters to millimeters, that's times 10. So if I've got 50 centimeters and I times that by 10, 50 times 10, 5 times 10, that would get me 500. Okay, 500 millimeters. Does that match what we've got? It does. So I know that my 50 centimeters goes in this last column here. Okay? So this part's tricky. If it is easier for you, please, like with this 50 centimeters, take and write 50 centimeters and figure out how many decimeters that's going to, or sorry, millimeters that's going to equal. I'll do it in a different pen. How many millimeters that's going to equal? Well, I know that 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters. 1 times 50 is 50. 10 times 50, 1 times 5 is 5, plus 2 zeros, 500 millimeters. If this makes it easier to understand, write out the conversion for each one if you need to. But if you can see that anything with a 55 associated with it is going to go into your column of 55 centimeters, then make that connection as well. Okay? Do whatever is going to work best for you. Okay, if you have any questions about today's lesson or questions about any of the practice problems that you need to do, be sure to email your teacher. Have a nice day.